A plane falls from the sky, and the desert shows no mercy. One woman, injured, alone, hunted, must fight scorching days, freezing nights, and the eyes of predators that never blink. Every step could be her last, until she discovers a secret buried in the sands for centuries. This is not just a fight for survival. This is a journey into the heart of the desert's darkest mysteries. Sarah had been a passenger only hours ago, flying over this wasteland with strangers she barely noticed. Now she lay sprawled on the burning sand, her body wrapped in a mixture of blood and dust. A deep gash throbbed above her temple, skin torn along her arm, and her clothes hung in ragged strips. The first sensation when she regained consciousness was pain and silence. With slow, shaking hands, she brushed the sand from her face. Every breath scraped her throat. The storm was still alive, forcing grains into her lungs with every inhale. She forced herself upright, eyes scanning the wreckage scattered across the dunes. Twisted metal glinted under the sun, seats torn from their frames, luggage ripped open and half buried. The air smelled faintly of smoke and fuel. No voices. No movement. Everyone who had been with her was gone. Near what was once her seat, she found a small backpack. Inside, a half-full bottle of water, 3 energy bars, and a small survival knife. That was all. Her pulse quickened. She remembered something she'd once heard in a survival documentary: move. Help might come, or you might find safety. But if you stop, you die. She looked at the sun, chose a direction, and began walking. The heat was suffocating, the kind that crawled under your skin, burning from the inside. Every step sank into the soft sand. She allowed herself only the smallest sip of water each time, tightening the cap with care. Hours passed. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the dunes. That was when she felt it, the prickling sensation of being watched. She turned. Nothing. Just the wind carving patterns in the sand. Then, at the edge of her vision, movement, low and fluid. A fox, its fur almost blending with the desert, eyes glinting in the fading light. And behind it, something larger. Sleek muscles, a long tail swaying with control. A cheetah. Sarah's throat was dry, but her mind sharpened. She drew her knife, walking faster. Every 10 minutes she looked back. The animals kept their distance, but they were closer than before. She climbed a sand ridge and scanned the horizon. No trees. No shelter. Only a shallow depression in the dunes, where the shadows had gathered into early night. She headed for it. When the sun was gone, the desert turned cruel in a new way. The heat bled from the air, replaced by a cold that sliced through her bones. She wrapped herself in the thin emergency blanket from her pack, placing a few rocks in a loose ring around her, a small barrier against curious predators. The cheetah's soft growl drifted from somewhere in the dark. The fox's claws scratched against the sand. Sarah tightened her grip on the knife. Sleep was out of the question. Her breaths came slow, her eyes sweeping the dark. The night was long, but she was still alive. The first light of dawn brushed across Sarah's exhausted face. Her lips were cracked, her eyes bloodshot from keeping watch all night. She reached for her bottle, only half remained. Sip it like gold, she told herself. If I waste it, tomorrow will be worse. By midday, the heat was once again merciless. She tore a strip from her shirt and tied it over her head, shielding herself from the sun. But her muscles ached with every step. The pain in her feet reminded her just how far she had pushed her body beyond its limits. It was then she saw it, a flicker of motion beyond a dune. Small. Quick. A desert hare. Her stomach clenched at the thought of food. She moved slowly, feet sinking softly into the sand, knife ready in her hand. The hare paused, ears twitching, then darted toward a dune. Sarah lunged. In one swift, desperate motion, she caught it. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from relief. Behind a ridge, she dug a small pit in the sand, gathering a handful of dry twigs and leaves scattered by the wind. Striking metal against stone, she coaxed a fragile spark into a flame. The fire was small, its smoke nearly invisible in the heat haze, but it was enough. The hare roasted over the tiny flames. The meat was tough, dry, but as she chewed, she could have sworn she was tasting the richest feast she'd ever known. The evening came quietly, the wind carrying with it a chill. Sarah wrapped the emergency blanket around her once more. Then she felt it. Somewhere behind her, across the open sand, the cheetah sat, watching. Even in the fading light, its coat glowed faintly golden, spots sharp against the sleek fur. Its eyes burned with hunger, but it didn't charge. It just waited. Sarah's heart pounded, but she forced herself to remember what she'd read: don't break eye contact. Don't run unless you have to. She stared right back at it, her knife between them. When the wind shifted, she made her move, leaving a piece of the roasted hare in the sand, far from her sleeping spot. It was a gamble, but it worked. Hours later, she heard the faint scrape of claws and the tearing of meat. For a while, at least, she was safe. 3 days into her journey, Sarah's body was nearly spent. The sun had bleached the edges of her clothes, her feet were raw from the sand. Only sheer stubbornness kept her moving. That afternoon, she climbed a tall dune, dragging herself over the crest. Below, half buried by sand and wind, she saw something strange, a cluster of rocks, and in the middle, a patch of sand darker than the rest. She slid down, brushing the sand away. Beneath it, a door. Old, wooden, reinforced with metal bands rusted by time. Her pulse quickened. She pulled harder, and the door gave way with a dry groan. A rush of cool, damp air spilled out, a stark contrast to the scorching desert. Inside was a chamber, built from ancient stone. The air smelled faintly of earth and minerals. Gold coins and rough gemstones lay scattered across the floor. Strange metal fragments caught the dim light. And at the far end, a scroll, its surface covered with symbols she couldn't read. When she unrolled it, the ink began to glow. Slowly, the symbols shifted, aligning themselves into the shape of a map. And there, at its center, was the mark of water, an oasis, hidden deep in the desert. Sarah's breath caught. Water meant life. People. Survival. She folded the scroll, slipping it into her backpack, along with a small gold coin. Then she turned toward the direction the map had shown. By late afternoon, her legs ached so badly she could barely lift them. But then, she saw it. On the horizon, a smear of green against the endless gold of the dunes. Her chest tightened. Her pace quickened. Soon, the sound reached her ears, the murmur of water, the whisper of palm leaves in the wind. Tears blurred her vision. She stumbled the last few steps and found herself at the edge of the oasis. Pools of clear water reflected the sky, streams trickled over smooth stones, and tall palms swayed gently. And then, voices. From between the trees, people emerged. Their clothes were worn but clean, their faces weathered but warm. They hurried to her side, offering water, steadying her as her legs threatened to give way. Days passed. Sarah's wounds began to heal, her strength returning. The people of the oasis taught her things she'd never imagined. They showed her how to find water in the heart of a cactus, how to read the wind for signs of a coming storm, and how to walk the dunes without sinking. At night, they sat by the fire, telling stories of the desert, of hidden cities swallowed by sand, and of travelers who had walked into storms and never returned. One evening, as the sun set behind the palms, Sarah looked at the people around her, their quiet laughter, their patient eyes, their hands hardened by work. She realized then that the true treasure wasn't the gold or gems she'd found. It wasn't even the map that had led her here. It was knowledge. The skill to survive where no one else could. The will to endure. And the kindness of strangers who had become her family. In the heart of the desert, Sarah had found not just life, but a new home.